Hi, Carol. Thank you for calling.
Yep.
So first and foremost, I mean, this concept is bonkers. I love it. I'm obsessed with it. So can you tell me about your first thoughts when Vince initially pitched the show to you?
Yes. Well, initially when he said that he wrote a lead for me, but he wasn't ready to give me the script, I just said yes. It doesn't matter. I don't care whatever he wrote was going to be great. But then when I read the first one, I only had the pilot for a long time, and that was bonkers. But I also was like, where's the show going after that though? So what will this world be? And then I had the second one, and then throughout shooting, I would get them, and it just keeps it kept making me, question new things. It's so hilariously funny sometimes in its observation of human behavior, and but then also these deep dive questions, also gut-wrenchingly painful at times. But I would just wrap my head around it and try to take it in and remember that Carol is also coming from that place of like, what is happening? Like, we've all been in those dreams where you're the only one shouting like the barn's on fire and everyone else is like, can you just sit down and calm down? And you're like, no, the barn is on fire. So yeah, I thought it was smart, super smart. And even when it's hilarious, it's funny in a very smart way. And then I knew it would be very, very challenging as an actor to play all the things that he wanted, and it's genre defying. It's also switching tones sometimes within the same scene. And there's nobody I'd rather do that with than Vince. So I was thrilled. But there was also a part of me, I was like, even if I wasn't in this would so be my kind of show. I loved it.
Yeah, it's great. And I mean, like you said, like, it's like the only person screaming that the barn is on fire. And I thought what was so interesting, obviously on Better Call Saul, you're in this kind of ensemble situation. But with Pluribus, you're alone, like, for a lot of it. And I mean, that's part of the concept. So I was so curious, like, Carol being the main focus, you being alone so much, did that scare you at all? What was that experience like?
Well, and by the way, my supporting cast, Carolina Widra, and Samba Shuta, and Carlos Manuel Vesca, those guys are great, and they raise your game when they're on set. I'm so incredibly fortunate that we found all of them and that I got to play with them. I will say that the long stretches by myself that I did quite a lot of course, if you were to turn the camera around, it's like 150 to 200 people, many of whom I did Better Call Saul with, and some of whom did Breaking Bad with Vince, and they are very much a family to me, and I can't even describe the working environment. If you're given material that is going to challenge you and take you to a new level in whatever field you're doing. But then I say the place you get to work every day is a group of 200 people that absolutely believe you can do it and want to make sure that you can soar in every way that you can. That's the kind of environment you get set up with on his sets. And so I never felt alone in that way. As far as the performance level of it, what was really interesting to me is that you see people alone a lot of time on screen, but there will be something that like suddenly they're doing a monologue to themselves. Like they're giving you a way in, and I knew Vince was going to do the more challenging thing, which is like, no, really, what would you do completely by yourself? Like, would you talk out loud? I mean, and I'm not playing off somebody, but she is constantly wrestling with her own thoughts. She's not in a void. And in fact, when you see her utterly alone, you see that sort of descent into madness that I think a lot of us would eventually get to if left alone for that long.
Yeah. And I mean, that descent into madness is so interesting because obviously the situation is so unique, but I think it speaks to the real world and that a lot of people these days feel like they're the only sane ones living in an insane world,
Sure.
with everything going on. And thematically, there's conformity, loneliness, happiness versus anger. So I'm curious what you hope kind of Pluribus sparks in these conversations, because it is this kind of thought-provoking experiment in a way.
Yeah, I mean, the best case scenario is that it inspires conversations in general, like you said, like regardless of the content of them. And one of the things Vince does so well and always has is at any given time, you can often understand both sides of the debate in the scene. You can understand why Diabate is saying, like, do you want to just go down raging against, or like old man yelling at clouds from The Simpsons, or do you want to like have fun while you're doing it? And just, to me, the questions he's raising are about all human nature, and they aren't by design topical. But I think you're right. We're reflecting right now a lot on like what does individual liberty mean, and unique thought, and how you can feel like you're on an island, but actually how much we need each other. I think there's big universal questions in this that I love about what does happiness really mean? What does it mean to be content? What does loving one another really mean? And what's good for one versus what's good for all? What does success really mean? What is it that we strive for in life? What is it that you're really going to hope that you made a change in while you're here? Like, there's big, big questions that I don't have the answers to, but I truly hope it does. And I one of the biggest reasons I can't wait for it to come out, other than we made it and I want there to be an audience, is because I want to talk to people about like some of these things that like, what would you do? What would you say? What would you think? How would you operate in this situation? So I'll be and my own family knows absolutely nothing about it. I can't wait to be sitting on the couch when they see it.
I know. I mean, there's so much mystery surrounding it. So when I went in, I was like, oh my gosh, this is crazy. But yeah, Apple obviously has been picked up for a second season already. And, you directed on Better Call Saul. Is there any chance we'll see you direct on Pluribus? Do you want to get involved in that way?
I don't know. I would like to direct again, and certainly directing on a show you're on and with people that already have your back and love you is a good way to do it. But I'm not sure. I mean, my hours were filled, very filled. I don't think there's a chance I could have directed this season, and I don't know what second season holds for me. What I get to do on this show, and what I got to do on Saul was utterly fulfilling too. And if they had said, no, we don't have a slot that you can direct, it still would have been, one of the best experiences of my entire life. But I threw my hat in the ring because I thought, wow, when else have I had the chance, to direct something that I care about this much, that I'm already involved with? I already know season after season of inside story, and I already know the actors, and they were receptive to me. So I thought, like, I'll try. But it is hard. It was very hard directing myself, and I don't know. Maybe. For right now, I'm just on cloud nine doing what I'm doing.
You're back in New Mexico. You're back with Ray. In many ways, this is a reunion of sorts, but it also feels so new and exciting. I was watching that first episode and I was like, it was a ride. So what was it like kind of finding that space between comfort and fear for this new show, this new kind of story that you're building?
That's a good way to put it. It's trying to find the comfort period. It's mostly just fear. Anytime you embark upon something new, there's a lot of money riding on the line, a lot of people's livelihoods, and you want it to be a success for selfish reasons and for some slightly more noble reasons too. First and foremost, I want it to be a success for Ray, who I love and who I created this show just for her. But there's a lot of fear because you kind of see it. It's endemic in the business now. Everybody is much more comfortable doing IP, rebooting stuff that pre-exists, and I think it's stuff you feel is more easy to bet on or bank on, and I feel very fortunate that Apple and Sony were behind me doing something completely new. That made me feel very flattered and very proud, and I want to do good for them because they took a bet on me that a lot of companies won't make nowadays.
Well, I mean, I would say you did a pretty good job so far. I mean, I'm not associated with Apple, but can you talk a little bit about where the idea for the show comes from, like what made it feel like the right time for a show like this? Because it feels very timely.
I'm glad it does. That is just pure dumb luck, or maybe it is and maybe it isn't. I started thinking about this show, the early stirrings of this show, if you will, started probably 8 or 9 years ago. I was working on Better Call Saul, and we would take these long lunch breaks, and I would take, long walks around the neighborhood around where our writer's room is in Burbank, California. And I'd let my mind wander on thinking about anything other than Better Call Saul, because, you're already in the room for 12 hours a day, so you need a break. And I started pondering this idea about a guy who the world is really, really nice to. Everybody loves this guy. They're very solicitous to a degree that's just insane. It's unheard of. People on the world will do anything and everything to make this guy happy. And that idea was kind of intriguing, and I didn't really have a story yet. It was just kind of a setup. But as I pondered it for months, I also started to realize about the same time that I was really loving working with Rhea Seehorn. Her character, Kim Wexler, in Better Call Saul, when Peter Gould and I hired her, we thought, oh, she's great, but we don't know where this character's going. We don't know if this character's going to be ultimately that important to Better Call Saul, the series. Maybe it's a girlfriend, the first in a long series of girlfriends we'll meet. We just don't know. And then Rhea made herself absolutely indispensable to the show. It reminded me of Aaron Paul on Breaking Bad. Aaron Paul, I was going to kill his character off at the end of the first season, and that was before I hired Aaron Paul. And he made himself indispensable and beloved by the crew, by the fans, by me. And very quickly, it was like, there's no way we're going to kill him off. And very quickly, same deal here. We realized there's no way we're getting rid of, Kim Wexler. No way we're going to get, Rhea off her show. She's money in the bank. So much so that I did something I've never really done before this series. I wrote the series specifically for one actor, Rhea. And so happy I did it because I knew she'd be great in this thing. And then the dailies started coming in. I got to direct the first 2, which was awesome. And I'm there behind the camera watching on the monitor and thinking to myself, God, she's even better than I thought she was going to be. And I felt that more and more as the season progressed, watching dailies, watching cut together episodes that I wasn't necessarily on the set the whole time for, directed by other directors. I just remember thinking, she's fantastic, and Carolina Vidra's fantastic, and Samba Shuta, and Carlos Manuel Vesca. We've got a lot of really good actors on this show, but it all starts with Rhea.
Yeah, and I mean, like you said, she's great. They're all great. And you mentioned directing the first 2 episodes, and I thought what was interesting is with Breaking Bad or Better Call Saul, those felt more like slow buildups leading to earth-shattering explosions, right? But with Pluribus, you kind of begin with the world falling apart. So how was that kind of challenging or different for you from a story perspective, looking at it like now I have to write the aftermath?
It's funny because I actually got off on a tangent, as I am wont to do in these kind of interviews. I realized I didn't answer your first question, but where did the idea come from? But the idea is, maybe it's pure dumb luck or maybe it isn't, that it's timely. But maybe part of what I was reacting to is, the country we live in, no surprise, and everyone knows this, is, it's just it feels like it's been cleaved down the middle and we've got 2 halves. And it feels like, there's the red side and the blue side. And then amongst the 2 sides, there's all these other balkanized kind of subdivisions. And it just feels like everybody is gone tribal, and we're all, this is my tribe and everyone else is crap. And, and it's just, maybe I was thinking somewhere along the way, there's got to be a better way. There's got to be this can't be how it ends, where we just become more and more fractured and more tribal and I don't think it ends, nor do I think it should end necessarily like it ends in Pluribus, where everybody is, one kind of a hive mind. But there's got to be some happy medium between the two. So I was probably thinking along those lines. And so if there is an element of timeliness, maybe some of it was luck, but maybe some of it was, feeling what's in the air the last however many years, of America and the world as well, becoming more factionalized.
Yeah, and I was just talking to Ray about that and kind of how, Carol is this sort of stand-in for people who do feel like they're the only sane ones living in an insane world. Yeah. And that's kind of how it feels to live these days. And what I love about Pluribus is it straddles this kind of line of comedy and horror and sci-fi and those kinds of things. And I know you worked on X-Files, obviously. There were elements of humor to Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul. But can you talk a little bit about moving more into a sci-fi direction with this? It
was fun getting to write sci-fi again. I enjoyed the hell out of Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul and El Camino. I had almost, going on 20 years of getting to live in that world. And I never really thought I'd be known as a crime guy or, hard-bitten crime and violence and drug dealing and all that stuff. But I had a great time with it. But returning to science fiction, which, as you said, I used to do for 7 great years on the X-Files, it felt kind of like a homecoming. And I enjoy science fiction very much. There's no one medium that I love more than the other. I'm really enjoying working in science fiction again because it's been so long since I've done it, but I'd love to do a Western someday. I'd love to do... It's really more about the characters than anything. The characters kind of dictate what the story and the world should look like. And this world, I thought the only way to realize this story is to make it science fiction, but... It's something I've always, ever since I was a little kid, something I always gravitated towards. So it's fun getting to do it again.
Yeah. Were there any specific influences that you kind of brought with you to this? I know that I had a couple things that came to mind, but I was curious what yours were.
Well, in the first episode, particularly of Pluribus, I'm trying to hit every touchstone. I'm trying to, starting with the Twilight Zone, my favorite. It's hard for me to pick favorites, play favorites, but if you held a gun to my head and said, what's your favorite TV show of all time, of which I have many, I would have to say probably the Twilight Zone. And so we're hitting some tried and true Twilight Zone themes. We're hitting Invasion of the Body Snatchers. We've got some Star Trek and the Borg in there, Star Trek: The Next Generation. We got a whole lot of post-apocalyptic touchstones. We got The Walking Dead and The Last of Us and Road Warrior. Well, maybe not so much Road Warrior. That's probably stretching it. But it's fun trying to think of all the sci-fi and horror tropes that you can think of and trying to mash them into this show, particularly the first episode, and then turning them all subsequently a little bit, askew, turning them on their ear. And it's an interesting thing. The pilot is technically the first episode, the first hour of this show, but it doesn't really stand on its own. You really have to watch the first two together to really get what the show is. And that's why I'm really glad Apple is putting the first two on simultaneously on they're putting them both up on the same day on November 7th. When they first said they were doing that, I thought, oh man, I'd rather just one a week, because then it lasts longer. Because I'm old school. When they drop all the episodes on one night, and you've been working in this thing for years, and suddenly, by Monday nobody's talking about it anymore. I hate that. But the fact they're doing them one a week, I'm like, great, fantastic. But why do you have to do the first two? And then I realized they're really smart to do it that way, because you really need to see the first 2 hours of this thing to really understand what's going on.
Yeah, and it feels like a massive blockbuster almost. The scale is huge, and it feels a bit bigger in a sense than, what you were doing on Bad and Better Call Saul in a way. So can you talk a little bit about what it was like to stage the apocalypse from like a practical perspective as like a director?
It was tough. Luckily, Apple gave us a lot of money and a lot of time to make this show. I mean, they were really generous in both those regards. And ultimately, the generosity of time, of schedule, is the most important single thing you could ask for and hope for. The time they gave us to make this thing was priceless. But yeah, there's one scene, the infamous scene 46 in the first episode of Pluribus. It's a oneer that takes place over 5 or 6 city blocks, and I wanted to show the process of the world, reaching this, the thing that happens in the first episode. I wanted to really sell it visually and figure out, how do we really make this cinematic and put it on screen. And I thought, well, there's no way to do it unless you have hundreds and hundreds of shots, different things going on. Oh my God, that'll kill me. I'm tired even thinking about that. Let's do it as a oneer. It'll be so much simpler. And Angie Meyer, my first AD, she just laughed at me. She said, "Are you kidding me?" When she read this, because I rewrote this scene to make it one shot instead of not hundreds, but dozens of shots, dozens of different setups. And she said, "You got to be kidding me." And I said, "No, it'll be simpler." And she said, "You're nuts, and I'm going to prove it to you, but because you're going to see how hard this is to do this." And it turned out to be this insanely difficult oneer. I'm really proud of it, but it almost killed all of us. And we shot it. We had a holdover. She figured it out. I would never figure out all this stuff on my own. That's why you hire people who are smarter than you, and then you say, "Here's what I want to do," and then you go off and have a hot dog, and they all put it together, make it happen. But we had a dress rehearsal night where we literally rehearsed the shot, and then the next day, or maybe a couple days later, I can't remember, we shot it for real, and it took all night long, 12 hours to do. I think we did 6 or 7 takes of it, and we wound up going with the very final take. But it was a Megillah. It was something. So yeah, putting this thing up on its feet, putting it on screen was a challenge and a half, this show, because we range all over the world basically. It's the first time I've ever shot in another country, not counting Canada, which doesn't really count, not counting Vancouver. We shot in Spain, we shot in the Canary Islands. We shot in Las Vegas, Nevada, which in a weird way is kind of its own country. And we were all over the place. And everybody was great. All these places were wonderfully hospitable to us, and loved the crews in all these places. And we had a good time. But it took probably a year or two off my life. It was harder than I thought it was going to be.
Yeah, well, I would say it paid off.
Good. Thank you.
But I think it's so thematically rich in so many ways. There's so many ideas being played with here: conformity, loneliness, happiness versus anger. All that and more is kind of explored. So to you, what is kind of the thesis of this show, or the thing you want people to take away from watching Pluribus?
This is going to sound so highfalutin because TV is just TV. It's not a cure for cancer. Never was, never will be. But I'd love to think that people will watch this show and think to themselves, I don't necessarily want to live in that world, maybe, or maybe I do. I don't. We worked really hard to make this a different kind of post-apocalypse. Every other post-apocalyptic show and movie and book you read, for instance, if you're living in The Walking Dead, the world of The Walking Dead, damn well you don't want to be a zombie. Nobody wants to be a zombie. I really wanted the difference with this show to be to give people the opportunity to argue over it. Would this actually be so bad? In some sense, could it not be paradise? And that's completely up to the viewer of the individual viewers of Pluribus to decide that one for themselves. I'm not telling anybody how to parse that. But I'd like to think people could watch this and say to themselves, maybe there is another way other than what we got going on in America right now. I mean, And I'm not even talking about taking a side here. I'm not talking left versus right. I'm talking about one thing I think everyone in this country can agree on right now, even the people at the far most polar opposite ends of the political spectrum in the country right now. I think everyone can agree that this isn't working. Everybody being at each other's throats all the time. I don't think anybody wishes for this. And it's just nobody wants to live in crazy town. And that's not about who you vote for or what side you're on. That's just about basic human kindness and respect for one another. So hopefully people will watch Pluribus and hopefully more than anything else, I just want to entertain folks. But I'd love folks to think, I don't know if I want to get full on Pluribusville, but I'm tired of crazy town. Maybe there's somewhere we can meet in the middle,
Yeah.
That would be a nice takeaway. That's a lot to ask for. It's a little highfalutin, but that would be great.
But certainly possible. But I just got one more question for you before we go. Pluribus has already been picked up for a second season. So, I'm curious about your long-term plan here. Do you have a certain amount of seasons mapped out, or do you have a story or a place you want to land on when all is said and done?
I have more of what I think of. I have more at this moment of an idea of how the show should end than I usually do, certainly than I did on Breaking Bad or Better Call Saul. I have an idea of where the show should go. It's stuff we talked about, the writers and I talked about in the writers' room for season 1. Having said that, I always will quickly get rid of a good idea for a better idea. And if better ideas come along, I'll happily discard what I'm thinking of right now. But yeah, I kind of feel like we have kind of a general roadmap for where the show should go. Having said that, I don't know how long the show should go. Every show before this one, Breaking Bad, Better Call Saul, I used to think to myself, like in the early days of Breaking Bad, I said, someone would ask me a question, how long after season 1? How many more seasons do you think you have? And I said, maybe, I don't know, 2.5, 3. Well, you can't do half a season, but it's like 2 or 3. 2 or 3 would probably be right. And then it turns out we had enough story for 6, which was a very nice surprise. So, in my mind's eye, yet again, I'm thinking, I don't know, maybe 3 seasons for Pluribus, but I don't know, maybe it goes past that. It's trickier to say. This one feels like it can't go on forever, but then none of them do. You always, the biggest trick in this job is knowing when to leave the party. No one, you want to leave people wanting more. You don't want to, be the guy with the lampshade on your head and everybody's like looking at their watch and like, oh, why won't he leave already? So that's one of the trickiest parts of the job.
Well, I can't wait to see where it goes. I loved what I've seen so far, and I want to thank you again for your time today. It was great speaking with you.
Right back at you, Graham. This was fun.
Figure it out. Why?
So you can join us.
What the